Hey there, my name is AJ Pickett and I make videos about role-playing games and lots of them. I upload twice a week with a live stream every weekend. You can also find me on Subscribestar, Patreon and Discord, Facebook and Twitter. Also, there is an option to join the channel as a member and I welcome any questions you have in the comment section down below. If you like this video or this channel, please hit that like button if you would be so kind. There are many ancient races in the world of Toril, and many more on other worlds. They have been transported to the Forgotten Realms in ages long past. There are a number of so-called creator races and the many intelligent civilizations that they've bred, created or fostered, some of which have thrived, others have risen and fallen and risen again, and some have just quietly gone about their lives over hundreds of generations, largely ignored by other races because of one reason or another. Today we're going to throw back the veil of obscurity and finally give them the attention they deserve, truly deserve. One of them, anyway, because if something is not done about them once and for all, they might just end up ruling a ruined and wretched world of suffering and despair. Today we're going to get deeply nerdy as we explore the lore of the Ixitachitl and their many cousins. You may have heard of the cloakers, a species of air-breathing manta ray-like creatures with the power of flight and an ability to cause dread in other creatures thanks to their inaudible subsonic moans. Cloakers are carnivorous man-eaters that dwell in the Underdark, intelligent, with a mysterious and wicked culture that worships foul powers. Related to them are the lurkers, which they resemble in many ways. Surface folk may mistake one for another, but there are distinct differences, such as the reliance on buoyant gas sacs inside the lurker, which gives them an extremely silent and stealthy means of flight, and their stone-like pigmentation that allows them to blend into the Underdark as consummate ambush predators. Lesser known to surface folk are the sinisters, also related, which have a much more bat-like appearance and a supernatural enhancement to their flight ability, but less of an evil and predatory nature than the first two cousin species. And then what is believed to be a far more ancient original race, the ixzan, which resemble the dreaded Ixitxachitl in most ways, but live only underground, while the Ixitachitl live only on the surface world in warm coastal seas and large inland bodies of water. Both of these species are also closely related to the Mantari, a rare species of flying intelligent manta ray-shaped creatures slightly smaller than the Ixitachitl and equipped with a 4-foot-long whip-like tail that dives down out of the air to skewer prey with. Its diet consists mostly of rodents, thankfully. The stinger at the end of its tail has a unique trait that damages the victim's nervous system. Instead of rolling for saving throws and damage rolls, the victim of a strike subtracts their constitution score from the number 19. Any remainder is the amount of damage that the stinger does. However, the effect is drastically worse if the Mantari strikes more than once. Each additional strike will inflict 4 times the difference between the victim's constitution number and 19. Mantari inhabit locations rich in vermin numbers, so they will occupy city sewers of other races, and there is a much rarer Arctic breed which are snow white and hunt snow rabbits, foxes, birds and baby seals out among the ice packs. They can be quite intelligent and benign, though most have only a high animal intelligence and behave aggressively towards humanoid races. There's also yet another cousin species that dwells in forested terrain, most similar to the lurker species. Instead of attacking from the air, the trapper lies in wait on the forest floor and then bursts up to engulf and suffocate its prey, which again mostly consists of vermin, particularly in their early life where they have hatched from their sticky glutinous sacs of eggs and immediately start crawling around hunting for vermin. The trapper hunts primarily by attacking with 2 poisonous barbs at the tips of its wings. The numbers of these creatures is relatively low compared to the large number of the aquatic Ixitachitl dwelling on the surface world. The population of the far more benevolent ixzan has never been very high as far as anyone knows, and the fact that they are not known to build structures that would leave a legacy of any past height of their civilization. Also, their habit of keeping an oral history rather than any writings doesn't help much either. There are, however, some ancient magical items attributed to them that hint at long-lost secrets and involvement with powerful events in the ancient past that are lost knowledge, perhaps to be discovered again by those who look in the most obscure and dangerous places. These days, the most numerous and dangerous breed, the Ixitachitl, are known as the demon rays or devil rays, but only by somewhat ignorant surface folk, preferring to roam the warm waters of Toril, constructing miles of twisting and turning tunnels that form labyrinthine structures inside the huge coral reefs of tropical seas. They are a domineering and avaricious race who constantly wage war for territory and will consume, enslave or kill any other creatures in their domain. even stripping all their coral reefs free of aquatic plant life. The reefs eventually become stark and barren after some time, which is a clear warning sign that marks the very strong presence of the Ixitachitl. Small groups don't leave as significant an impact on the appearance of a reef. They just occupy hollowed out bits of it. Ixitachitl don't really need shelter, there's no weather in the sea. The shelters are just for purely practical purposes, such as storage, places to keep their slaves, and a place to do things out of the way of huge sea predators or prying eyes. Ed Greenwood wrote an ecology article for the Ixitachitl on the pages of Dragon magazine issue 85 in May 1984. It is written as a recount of the knowledge found in volume 5 of the works of the sage named Nenemith. I'll do my best to recount it for you, with some adjustments for the current edition of Dungeons & Dragons rules, and of course adding in my own little notes as I go. Found in colonies of sometimes as many as 100 or more in shallow tropical seas, Ixitachitl typically lair in well-concealed grottos or tunnels in the midst of coral reefs. They worship the demon prince Demogorgon, and from him gain the use of clerical spells, with some creatures attaining level 8 as clerics. Although they are very seldom encountered by humans and humanoids who travel in or on the seas, the Ixitachitl are a numerous race and rule large areas of the coastal salt waters of Toril, relying on their aggressive nature and their magical powers to build an undersea empire of sorts. Ixitachitl are carnivorous and prey on all marine life that they can kill and devour, this even extending at times when they attack in huge hunting packs to giant octopi, whales, and on at least one documented occasion, a dragon turtle. The creatures range far from their lairs in search of food and often battle sahuagen, lycantha, and especially tritons and merfolk. The superior organisation and tactics of those two races have earned them victory over the Ixitachitl often enough to keep these magical endowed rays from destroying all resistance and mastering the oceans. But at the same time, the Ixitachitl have certainly made their presence felt, and in some areas of this undersea world, they have all but eradicated aquatic elves in many warm seas, and the Tritons have largely found it easier to make their abodes in deeper waters, and only venture into the shallower warm waters in armed bands, as a result of Ixitachitl activities therein. The average Triton would probably react with disbelief that the people of the surface world know next to nothing about one of their most hated and feared foes. Because of the enmity between the demon lord Orcus and Demogorgon, the prince of demons, intelligent marine undead of all kinds will not aid and sometimes will actively oppose the rays. Ixitachitl, for their part, devour such prey wherever it can be found, and so the undead largely avoid Ixitachitl when they can, or perhaps it's just that there's none left in those territories. Those rays with especially powerful clerical abilities can raise additional recruits for their armies by use of the Animate Dead spell, but are unable to magically control or influence undead because of the influence of Orcus against them, which offers too much resistance. For this reason, they only raise groups of their own dead, which is an unusual sight to see, as the Ixitachitl do not have skeletons like humans and humanoids or other vertebrates do. Their bones are unconnected pieces of cartilage that cannot be animated like a human skeleton can be, so the bodies of dead Ixitachitl can only be animated as zombies. In battle, Ixitachitl swoop rapidly at opponents from opposing directions and levels, quite often bursting up from the seafloor where they are concealed, seeking to confuse prey by striking at it from two or more sides at once. In this maneuver, they are often led by a so-called Vampiric Ixitachitl present in their number, which are envied and personally powerful war leaders and influential individuals in Ixitachitl society. It should be noted that these Devil Ray vampires are not the same as other vampires. Obviously, being immersed in running water does them no harm. Holy water is also useless. They can't assume a gaseous form or shapeshift into any other creature, nor can they pass this vampirism along to their victims. But they do drain the blood and vitality from their prey, and they do have supernatural regeneration powers. The most powerfully endowed of the servants of Demogorgon, which are the social leaders of Ixitachitl society, hang back until the single most powerful opponents are identified, whereupon they then move in to attack with spells. All of the spells they use that require a touch attack are typically delivered via a bite. These powerful spell users typically swoop together with two or more other Ixitachitl so that the target will find it difficult to escape their attacks. Sometimes Ixitachitl burrow into the bottom, sand, as I said, leaving only their eyes uncovered to escape dangerous foes, but more often they do this to lie in wait for speedy prey. which they then ambush in a manner similar to the way that sharks do sometimes. Ixitachitl can sense vibrations for great distances underwater, as is common with many large predators, by means of receptors on their backs and tails. The shockwaves of an explosion, for instance, they can hear from miles away. They also have a 60-foot dark vision, and I would give them advantage on perception checks involving their keen sense of smell, as is typical to shark-like creatures. They have a form of speech by which they can communicate openly with one another, and with some sahuagen that have learned at least the rudiments of their strange tongue. And those ixitachitl with access to proper spells can also communicate magically with other creatures, using the tongues spell. Ixitachitl have a second form of language that they can use among themselves and with some other marine creatures, such as the sahuagen, which is best described as touch telepathy. This is a form of limited mental exchange possible only between creatures the ixitachitl are actually in physical contact with, using their tails usually. Groups of ixitachitl sometimes swim in stacks, fins beating in unison one atop another, belly to back. This is believed to be a form of this mental communication, transmitting emotions or general thoughts, and not mating or courting behaviour. From an outsider's perspective, they all look very similar to each other, except in size, typically. Among their own kind, the ixitachitl can easily distinguish the individuality and sexes of others of their kind, even from a distance. Each ixitachitl mates once a year, and the timing of it is fairly random as there are no seasons as we know them in the warm tropical waters. Beneath the waves of the tropical seas, it's pristine all the time. The process is initiated by a female who uses a male to mate with, sometimes aggressively. By this method, some sages argue, the females deliberately attempt to breed and improve the race as a whole. The life cycle of ixitachitl is still poorly understood. 6 months after mating, the female typically gives birth to a single offspring, live, not eggs, born in full control of its physical faculties, but in order to have vampiric powers or innate spellcasting powers, it must be either born with vampiric traits or be inducted into the worship of Demogorgon. After only 3 months, the ixitachitl will have reached its adult size, if there is sufficient food to support such rapid growth. Increases in spell capability and hit dice for those rare individuals able to attain them come at a rate of 1 level of spell use every 6 months and 1 hit die every year thereafter, so that it takes an additional 3 years for a leader-type cleric to reach full maturity. The characteristics that produce a vampiric cleric-type ixitachitl are apparently not hereditary, else there would be a greater abundance of such creatures because the females would breed for them specifically, but are passed on randomly and infrequently, kind of like sorcery among surface folk. Most ixitachitl live for 30 years or so, but some are known to live for 10 times that long, most likely those with the vampiric traits who have a closer connection to the demon prince. Some of the ixitachitls just continue to grow in strength and power, and from these individuals come each of the colony's grand leaders and decision makers. However, potential leaders must run the lifelong gauntlet of their fellow ixitachitl, who are quick to set upon any whom they feel fail to meet the standards of their society, such as disrespect or disloyalty to Demogorgon. This weeding out process is brutal and constant, thanks again to Demogorgon's demands for a fairly constant and horrific cavalcade of rituals that often involve fairly extreme levels of violence. Thanks to this process, many would-be leaders are executed well before they amount to anything much, and overall the effect has prevented the entire species from rising to a position of absolute domination of the seas, along with the predations of merfolk and triton. That and their dislike of very cold waters. At the same time, this process seems to help ensure the unity of purpose that binds the members of an ixitachitl colony together and keeps them, as a group, strongly loyal to Demogorgon. In fact, it is said by those who should know that ixitachitl are a species that is more fervently attached to Demogorgon's wishes and aims than any other species of creature in the D&D multiverse. This loyalty is not without its rewards, and all of the ixitachitl feel a measure of Demogorgon's power within them, able to cast at least a single level 1 clerical spell as an innate power. Their culture revolves around Demogorgon, but it's not like the Prince of Demons is an attentive deity who sends visions and portents of every moment of every day to guide his faithful, so what passes for lore and doctrine among the Rays is mostly what they think Demogorgon wants. They are so inured to violence, horror and danger that the world outside of their own culture holds little for them to fear, and they just ignore anything short of magical terror. You just can't intimidate an ixitachitl, as any sign of weaknesses it displays will ensure its fellows are going to skin it alive while eating its still gurgling entrails before its dying eyes as its soul gets torn away into the foul pits of the abyss, destined to suffer torments no living being could imagine for millennia. Your huffing and shouting barbarian is not going to make a dent. The leaders of their society are not foolhardy. They are quick to figure out the best way to get ahead is riding on the crest of those dying in their place. So it's not uncommon for a charismatic leader to make a quiet exit from a deadly situation and then go rouse up a mob of younger, ambitious rays using the cult of Demogorgon to rile them to fanatical levels of rage and violence, simply pointing at whatever the elder wants them to destroy and letting them have at it. For this reason, it's generally a good idea never to leave a single Ixitxachitl alive, otherwise they will pass their grudge onto their fellows and come back at you 100 times worse than before. Now with zombies and tormented, screamingly insane, mutilated, enchanted and parasitically infected, mutant, demon-tainted slaves that will happily die in combat just to end their own suffering. It will probably take some of the fun out of it for the party paladin when the most formidable opponent's war cry is "Kill me, kill me." Vampiric Ixitachitl are more feared by other creatures than even the most powerful of the non-vampiric Ixitachitl leaders, even the big, gnarly ones, because of their lethal bite which sap her victims' very life force, and because of their ability to heal wounds that they suffer. On very rare occasions, vampiric Ixitachitl become leaders or lieutenants of a colony, and such creatures are said by many to be the most dangerous undersea denizens of their size. Whenever a colony of Ixitachitl contains 100 or more individuals, one of them is bound to be a leader type with vampiric powers. The leaders of Ixitachitl colonies will instruct their underlings to seek out treasures so that they can attain usable magic items. Anything that can be operated without use of hands is highly sought after, and it's one of the very few reasons they will ever speak with or negotiate with another race. Ixitachitl have been seen wearing rings on their tails and wielding rods, staves and the like that they can hold in their clenched jaws. If they come across items of magic that they can't use themselves, they will hide them away to keep them from the grasp of other creatures and possibly to use as a bargaining tool to get the magic items that they can use. Sometimes Ixitachitl will cooperate with other aquatic creatures such as sea hags or even sahuagen or lycanth for mutual gain, and have been known to hire or train creatures such as sea lions to work for them. Although sharks regard the Ixitachitl as something like their cousins, they are typically allied with the sahuagen instead, and have faced the rays in battle so much that they have acquired a dislike for them over the eons, or perhaps they just find the Ixitachitl flesh to be tasty. Surface-dwelling humanoids certainly don't, on the very rare occasions that they are stupid enough to cook it and try it. This is a race that is touched by the prince of demons. You do not eat the meat of demon-tainted people. That is like Adventurer's Survival Manual 101. Sharks just happen to be highly resistant to mutation and immune to cancer. So there you go. In the world of toril, further research is said to have been conducted, and details can be found in the collated works of Ramazith of Baldur's Gate and Alortham of the Moonshae Isles. We have an updated listing for 5th edition for the 3 different types of Ixitachitl thanks to the adventure named Out of the Abyss. And do keep in mind these creatures almost always attack in groups that outnumber adventuring parties quite significantly. That is the danger of them. So a stock standard common Ixitachitl is a small aberration, chaotic evil of course, otherwise it wouldn't survive much past the first ritual murders of the day in their society. With a natural armor class of 15 and from 8 to 28 with an average of 18 hit points. They have a swim speed of 30 feet per round and really can't operate on dry land at all. They flop around like a landed trout if taken out of the water. They can't breathe air either. They have a 60-foot dark vision, passive perception of 11, and most of their attributes are better than human average with a high dexterity of 16, reflecting their superior swimming ability. They are +3 to hit with a single bite attack each round that inflicts 1d6 plus 1 piercing damage. Also, when a creature provokes an attack of opportunity from the Ixitachitl can make a barbed tail strike, +5 to hit a single target within 5 feet, inflicting 1d8 plus 3 piercing damage, and each ray counts as a challenge rating 1/4 combatant. Bear in mind that they attack in groups, and the strategy is to provoke as many opportunity attacks in that group as they can. The leaders among them that are not vampiric, you can just use the listing for an Ixitachitl cleric, but remove the vampiric bite and regeneration traits. So, the vampiric leaders They are listed as level 5 spellcasters, and remember, they list the average example of a monster, not the most powerful version of their kind. So you can increase this dramatically to a level 8 spellcaster and boost their abilities, maybe even give them legendary abilities if they're supreme leaders of a group. They are medium-sized aberrations with a challenge rating of 2. They have a natural armor class of 16 and from 16 to 72 with an average of 44 hit points. Slightly higher attributes, but largely the same. Their Demogorgon granted spell powers they have listed are pretty ho-hum in the book, and actually very tame. Dispel magic, tongues, hold person, silence, charm person, create or destroy water is interesting, guidance and thaumaturgy. Feel free to select other options, and I strongly suggest you make up some interesting new spells, because this is magic granted to an ancient and alien race by one of the most ancient and powerful of the Tanari demons. By the most ancient and powerful of the Tanari demons. Get creative. The spell save DC is 11 for these spells and they're plus 3 to hit. So perhaps if a character fails their saving throw, they get surrounded by a cloud of rot grubs. Or their lungs suddenly require water rather than air to breathe. Or their sword turns into a vicious moray eel. Have some fun with it. The Vampiric Ixitachitl regenerates 10 hit points at the start of each of its turns, only dying if it starts a turn with 0 hit points. So they are not undead. Their Vampiric Bite is plus 4 to hit and does 1d8 plus 2 piercing damage, plus the target must succeed on a DC 11 Constitution saving throw, or its hit point maximum is reduced by an amount equal to the damage taken, and the Ixitachitl regains hit points to that amount. This can quickly spiral out of control. The reduction lasts until the target finishes a long rest, and the target dies if its hit point maximum is reduced to 0. Be careful with this, it can wipe out player parties. So, they also have the same barbed tail opportunity attack, which is plus 6 to hit. It has a 10-foot reach in this instance and does 1d10 plus 4 piercing damage. I think the Ixitachitl present an excellent opportunity to throw a serious threat at your game world, as you could imagine how dangerous it would be if the Ixitachitl discovered magic that allowed them to operate on dry land for extended periods of time, seemingly swimming a few feet off the ground in bubbles of floating water, or wearing rings of flight and air breathing or some such. A concerted effort by a combined force of 20 large colonies could see an army of 19,000 warriors, a couple of squadrons of vampiric clerics and who knows how many undead, as well as a force of thousands of slaves attacking the city of Waterdeep, completely and literally out of the blue. Perhaps they uncover some sort of ancient ritual that could create a tidal wave that washes over the city, leaving a flooded streets choked with these devil rays. Is Waterdeep prepared for such sort of a violent invasion? Could one band of plucky adventurers manage to locate the supreme leader of the Ixitachitl forces and send contradictory orders that ends up halting the invasion as the Ixitachitl forces break out in violence and brutal internal purges? Hey, maybe Demogorgon's avatar will show up and join in the fun. You get to decide. Please hit the like button if you made it this far. Subscribe if you like what I do. Check out my Subscribestar or Patreon for all the links to the full scripts for these videos. Buy some Teespring merchandise. Wear your geek with pride. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.